And next guest is Casey Watts. Casey is a founder of Casey Watts Coaching and Consulting LLC and a team leadership expert. She has over 20 years of experience in education as a classroom teacher, adjunct professor, academic coordinator, and a district instructional specialist. She is passionate about empowering teams to move beyond silos and transform into cohesive, vision driven powerhouses. Through strategic guidance and practical tools, Casey helps leaders cultivate clarity, collaboration, and a collective purpose that drives meaningful results. With a bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies and a master's in education from Stephen F. Austin State University, Casey has dedicated her career to fostering collective efficacy. She specializes in equipping educators and leaders with actionable strategies to close learning gaps, build teacher capacity, and enhance team dynamics. Her visionary approach and ability to ask the right questions spark transformation, help teams identify their unique strengths, and script the critical moves needed to achieve their goals. In addition to work with schools and organizations, Casey hosts the Catching Up with Casey podcast, where she explores innovative approaches to leadership, shares insights on team building, and inspires leaders to lead with intention and impact. Whether facilitating workshops, speaking at conferences, or coaching leaders one-on-one, Casey is committed to helping teams unlock their full potential and create lasting change. Welcome to the podcast, Casey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've already decided, man, I'm gonna pare down my biography significantly. Uh,
Well, you've done a lot, so it's good to highlight those things. And we'll jump right in with the question I start off with everyone. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
yeah. This, when you asked me this question, because I knew you were going to ask me this, and I knew my answer to this question almost immediately. The same story pops into my head time and time again. I was a classroom teacher for many years. And the first time that I stepped out of being a classroom teacher, I was promoted to an academic coordinator position. And I had been working in this school. So I'd been working previously in other districts, but at this school where I was promoted to this position, I'd been working for 2 years. So two
Okay.
whole years I was in the classroom and I was promoted, or I was asked, would you like to be? We want to offer you this position as academic coordinator. And just for all intents and purposes, think of academic coordinator um, as equivalent to an assistant principal. Okay, but that's the best way I can explain it for how it was approached in on this campus. And of course, even though I had been in a classroom for 2 years on that campus, and I was only 27 years old, I just felt so flattered. And of course, I was like, of course, I'm going to say yes to this. So I say yes. I leave my classroom. I remember packing up my boxes in my first grade classroom, just tears in my eyes. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing, but I was like, why wouldn't I take this opportunity? Of course, I'm going to take this opportunity. And it ended up being the worst year of all of the years of my career. All of the years of my career, it was the worst year. And there were a lot of factors that played into that. But you know, I I'm going to say first and foremost, I wasn't prepared for this role at all. Yes, I was a master classroom teacher and I was a high achiever, but being a classroom teacher and a high achiever in that space was so different than leading adults. And those were skills that I did not have. And when I got into the position, because I had been a master classroom teacher, it was assumed that, well, of course, she's going to have the skills necessary to be able to lead in this capacity. And I did not have those skills. The other thing that made it really challenging is that I am not a yes woman. And I think my boss, the person who promoted me, thought that I was going to be a yes woman. But instead, I am someone who pushes boundaries and I want to challenge the status quo. And so we butted heads all year long. Let me tell you that we got to a point in the school year where she literally called me into her office and changed my job description. It was awful. And I could feel, I don't know if you've ever worked in a place like this, but I unfortunately have, where I've experienced I'm going to call them a manager instead of a leader, but I've experienced a manager who their way of getting rid of someone was to make your life complete misery, right? And that's what it was for me. It was just like one thing after another, and it got so bad that, like I felt like I was siloed myself. I didn't have a relationship with my boss. I didn't have a strong relationship with teachers because they could see right through me. They could see she's 27. What is she doing in that position? And so, there was turmoil there, and I was trying to make change happen, and it just wasn't working out. I remember coming home with migraines day in and day out, tears. I didn't know who to trust. It was truly miserable. I could not wait to get out. And so I took this position, I think, because of my pride. Like, of course, I'm
Yeah.
going to take this position because they're offering it to me, and it's boosting my pride. And because of my pride, I tried to stick with it all year long, and I was determined to make it work, and it just wasn't working out. Thankfully, I had enough sense by the end of the year when she said, okay, here's how she phrased it. You are such a great classroom teacher. We really need you back in the classroom. And I knew behind it all,
Yeah.
like, yeah, right. She's saying we need to get you out of here because this is not
Yeah.
working out. And I said, you know what? I'm fine with that. And she said, well, we only have this one classroom available. And it was a grade level that I did not ever want to teach, but I was willing to take it
Yeah.
because that's how badly I wanted to leave. It was just, I was so in the trenches, just trying to figure out a way to crawl out. And I said, you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it for at least a year. And I would love to talk about how we can maybe change grade levels in the future if that becomes a
Okay.
possibility.
Hmm.
And you know what? I ended up absolutely loving the grade level that she put me in. It changed, I mean, it just changed everything. And in that, I was able to grow and learn, like, what is leadership? What is it not? What did I do that was successful? What did I do that was not successful? And I was knocked down quite a bit, but it was necessary for my growth. And I am actually, I know it's kind of crazy to say this, but I'm actually kind of grateful for that turmoil that I went through because I now have grown from it and I can speak to people who have been through that kind of experience. So, yeah, that's my trench moment that I had to crawl out of.
Yeah, and it was definitely a year. And I see how, there are people that leaders sometimes see, as a master teacher, they assume that you'll be able to teach the adults or, be in that leadership role. But like you said, you weren't prepared deep down and leaving the classroom, packing up your stuff, like you felt that like sense that this you were doing the wrong thing, maybe even before you totally left the
Mhm.
classroom. But luckily it worked out and you were able to stay at the school, go back to the classroom. The other grade level turned out to be a good change for you. But yeah, you kind of came full circle, and now you're back to giving PD to adults, but you've been able to grow in the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I talk about in a lot of my like keynotes and PD with people is really breaking down silos and how do we break down silos and build cohesive teams where we're not experiencing such turmoil in these isolated ways. And it came from that experience. That was one of the experiences that led me to that.
So let's talk a little bit about just how you got into fostering collective efficacy. We've all gotten some PD or read a little bit about collective efficacy, and how did that come from this experience of this trench story this year, and then working now as a consultant and a speaker after that experience.
Yeah. In my book, I just recently published a book called The Craft of Clarity. And the subtitle is Six Steps to Bridge Gaps, Foster Commitment, and Create Sustainable Alignment. And in that, I do talk about collective efficacy, but I feel like it's one of those hot topic words, that we throw out there, but I don't always know that
Yeah.
we know exactly what it means. And
Mhm.
just as a quick definition, collective efficacy is the belief that we as a group of people can do more together. Like when we put our efforts together, we can make an impact. But in my book, I talk about how collective efficacy is really a little bit more than that. And we will know that we've achieved collective efficacy like if people can commit to a greater purpose, even if I'm having a bad day, even if this year is really tough and the climate is kind of suffering, we have a culture where people are committed, even if those things are happening.
Yeah.
And so I talk a lot about commitment, in building collective efficacy. But in all of my experiences, including this one where I was put in a position that I was not ready for, I have found myself almost bridging the gap between two groups of people all the time. So in that position, I was supposed to function as someone in between teachers and district or campus leader. Didn't work out because I didn't know what I was doing. But even still, like when I left the classroom or left that position, went back to the classroom, I heard all of the narratives that teachers were saying and how different that narrative was from what the leaders on the campus were saying. And the same thing has happened over time. As a district instructional leader, I am hearing here's what teachers are saying versus here's what campus principals are saying. Or here's what campus principals are saying, and here's what the district administrators are saying. So I'm seeing all of these different narratives. And because we have so many different perspectives and narratives, we're having a hard time creating that collective efficacy and getting all on the same page and moving all in the same direction. And it's just become a passion of mine to bridge those gaps and to be almost the needle and thread that's stitching all of these people and groups together. And it's, that experience of being in the trenches was a huge, huge part of that.
And when you're working at the district level, do you feel like um, so the size matters in terms of like how many employees, how many schools you're working with, or how big a school is in terms of like the district to the principals and the district to the teachers? Because there's so many different voices in the room. So do you have experience in different sizes of districts and how that works?
Yeah, I will say most of my experience has been I have a passion for smaller rural schools. I have worked in larger districts and it's not a surprise that in those larger districts, it's much harder to create that collective efficacy
Yeah,
because there are so many people, so many voices, so many teams. But I talk about in my book an idea from General Stanley McChrystal, I think is his name, but he talks about the idea of creating a team of teams. And I think in schools, especially in larger districts, we don't always function as a team of teams. Instead, we function as separate teams who are working almost against each other sometimes is what
yeah,
it can feel
yeah,
like. But then on the flip side of that, in a smaller rural district, you are dealing with people who have been in that same district for most of their careers, if not their lives. And so creating change is really, really challenging. And they have homegrown leaders who really, I mean, I'm a prime example of that. I was picked from the litter, and
yeah,
it was, in all honesty, not a good pick because they were picking me based on my skills as a master teacher, not thinking about how I was going to be as a leader. And they also weren't thinking, okay, once she does get this position, if she doesn't yet have these skills, what are we going to do to make it possible for her to have these skills? Like our onboarding processes, especially in rural districts, is
yeah,
almost non-existent.
yeah. Yeah, and I see how, like you're saying, if there's not that like leadership, there might be a pipeline, but also like that piece where you're like learning and having exposure to teacher leader type role, or giving PD within the school instead of just being, like you said, handpicked and put in a position, saying yes and not necessarily being um, able to function. And you saw that quickly, right? I see there are leaders sometimes that learn the hard way. They stay in a position like that for many years, and they find, they're able to grow with a different leader, right? But
Mhm.
I think that that does happen a lot. People are maybe not ready, and
Yeah.
learning kind of as you go helps a lot as well. So tell me now about your book, The Craft of Clarity. It's just been published in January, and it's about the quiet chaos that schools go through when they're cycling through new initiatives, and there's not any meaningful alignment a lot of the time between the leaders and the teams, and it can
Yeah.
then fall into micromanagement. So, what can people learn from your book?
Yeah. I mean, I love everything that you just said. It's spot on. Um, it is my belief that those like misalignment and a quiet chaos in schools happens because we lack clarity. Like, we as leaders, you can have a strategy for implementing a new initiative or trying to bridge gaps in student learning. Like, we see it in strategic plans all the time, but 63%, if not more, of strategic plans fail year after year. And it's because we haven't brought clarity to that strategy. We've just said, yep, we know we need to work on this. Okay, we're going to purchase this, 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 and this, or we're going to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah,
And we say that when we create the plan, but then there's no clarity created to support that. So then it just kind of fizzles out or falls flat.
yeah,
And our people are left, like I said, in this quiet chaos. Like they're going to continue on day in and day out, doing what they feel like is best for their students or their campus, and nothing's really going to change. And we'll just keep cycling through the same problems again and again. But if we can create clarity for ourselves and for other people, then we're going to be able to, as I said earlier, bridge gaps not only in student learning, but first and foremost, we're going to bridge gaps among our teams. And that has to happen first. And so in the book, I talk about creating the craft of clarity by going through some different habits that we have to build as leaders. And I take leaders through 6 habits that they need to build in order to gain clarity and create clarity. And I share about this cycle as though they are steps, but they really are habits that you can come back to again and again and again. So I'm going to share really quickly those 6 different steps that I take leaders through in the clarity cycle framework. It starts with vision or creating a focus, then setting goals, gaining insight from your people, casting a vision and scripting critical moves, providing feedback regularly and celebrating systematically, and then finally thinking about how to sustain progress over time. So I write about each of those steps in detail in the book.
yeah. And I think a lot of teams, they have that vision and they're setting goals, right? But
Yep.
the other steps that you're talking about, a lot of the time it stops at the vision and the goal setting, and really, following through with everything. And I think also, um, how would you address when there's a lot of turnover at the building leader level, right? And maybe
Mhm.
the team of teachers remains, but maybe they've had a school where there are principals that stay 2 to 3 years and then leave, but they're trying to, not have to come back to the same initiative 10 years later, but
Mm.
keep the ball moving with what has been working.
Yeah. Huh. I mean, that's one thing that will put campus in the trenches, right? Like
Yeah.
you, I mean, I'm working in a district right now that the elementary campus has experienced that exactly, where they have had literally 4 to 5 different leaders over the last 4 years that I've been here. And I am so surprised at how the people have stayed and stuck in there. But again, I'm in a rural district. People were born and raised here, so they they are clinging to this idea of this being home for them. And you just have people on campus that I think sometimes it's the people on your campus more than the leader who are going to create that consistency over time. Like if you are having leadership turnover, who are going to be your core people that are going to keep carrying the rest of your organization along? Um, sometimes that's not always like we don't always see that, but I've been fortunate to see that happen. But yeah, I don't know. This is a hard question to answer. If I was speaking to a leader going to a campus that had significant leadership turnover, I would absolutely say to them, slow your roll in the beginning and consider where your people want to go before pushing your own initiative. I write about this in the book where I talk about sometimes as a leader, you get so passionate about the things that are heavy on your heart or things that you are passionate about. Like for example, you might be a leader who has a lot of experience with reading initiatives or phonics instruction or whatever it might be, and you're really passionate about that. So sometimes, and I think we unknowingly do it, we're pushing those things because we're passionate about those things. But our people may not be passionate and it may just overwhelm them. And I think it's important too. I think it's actually the responsibility of district leaders to be sure that if a new leader is going in to a campus, they are having those hard conversations and being the mentors that coach them through leading that campus who has gone through significant turnover.
Yeah. And I think like you said, it's taking your time getting to know like what the staff has been up to, how they functioned, what they're passionate about.
Mhm.
Right. And I think all too often the mistake happens that a leader comes in, they're passionate about something. They try to get that off the ground, it fails.
Yep.
And eventually they
Yep.
leave.
Exactly right, because that can make them, they can start to go through the trenches thinking, I know this is going to make such a big difference if we could all just get on board with this. Man, we would see so much growth. And then they get burned out trying to push that passion on other people or that initiative, and it fails. And so they get in the trenches themselves. They're going to go find something else to do.
So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. As I mentioned, your podcast is called the Catching Up with Casey podcast. You're at 100 episodes. Tell me about like the format, how often you put it out. Do you have a theme that you go with? Those types of things.
Yeah. So on the Catching Up with Casey show, my guest and I talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. So if you are a person who is a team facilitator, a team leader, you work with teams in any kind of way, and that could be small teams to really large teams. So you might be an instructional coach or teacher leader who is in charge of facilitating PLCs. This could be a show for you. Or you are a campus leader and you are in charge of leading teams of people. This is a great show for you. Same for district leaders or directors of programs. But on this show, I typically put it out every Monday. So this is a live podcast show. So it live streams to YouTube and LinkedIn almost every Monday. On the rare occasion, I'll take a Monday off, but typically every Monday I'm going live, YouTube, LinkedIn, and then the recording goes up to, your any of your podcast platforms that you enjoy listening to. And when I'm talking to people on this show, because I have guests of all different types, so I have authors as guests, I have people who are in the trenches and telling us about what they're doing in their own school districts as guests. And so I have quite the range of guests who come on and share about things. But what they share about falls under the umbrella of three primary things that I believe build cohesive teams. The first is, of course, clarity. That's always going to be my primary focus is how are we creating clarity for our people? The second is character and how we're building like self and social awareness skills to support our teams. And then finally, the last one is collaboration. So, what are all of the processes and protocols and thoughts that we have behind authentic collaboration versus faux collaboration? So, that in a nutshell is the show.
And how long has that show been on the air?
Ooh, it's, I can't even tell you. It has strongly been because when I first started the podcast, it was one of those things where I was like, I think I want to do a podcast. And I just,
Uh,
who knows what random things I was talking about in the beginning. But I think I'm going on about 2 or 3 years, very consistently the last 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Yeah, because it takes effort to get to that 100 episode mark, right? And keep it consistent. But yeah, to
Yeah,
try to trace back, like, it could have been going slow at the beginning, right? But yeah, so it sounds
yeah,
like these are things that people can tune into. Like you said, it's live Mondays, but then also you put out the recording talking about really getting clarity, working with people authentically, right? And why
yes,
I would well, I want to know a little bit more about that piece when you're talking about the authentic versus the maybe the false collaboration or fake collaboration, because in teacher teams,
yeah.
a lot of the time they're asked, like, you have the building PD for a full day, and they're asked to do X, Y, and Z. And there's jokes on Instagram Reels about teachers will just sit there, they'll talk, and then they'll put something on a chart paper, right? So it's like, because they don't want to necessarily do what's been asked, right? So,
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I've been there. I've been that person in that kind of meeting that has said, if we just do this, nobody will ever know, and we can go back to our classrooms and do what we need to do. I've
yeah,
been there, and I understand that there's a time and place for that actually. But I also believe that so often, like when I work with schools, a lot of the times when I meet with teams, this is one of my favorite things I get to do when I go on consulting jobs. I often get to do my own listening tours and gain insight from stakeholders so I can hear what the campus principal is saying, what their narrative is. And then I get to privately have conversations with teachers, and it can be either individual teachers or teams of teachers. And I just love that part of my job because, again, I get to try to sew those two things together. But one thing that I ask a lot of the time is tell me about how your team collaborates together. Like how do you feel like collaboration is for your team? And almost always they will say, "Oh, we collaborate really, really well." And so I probe further and say, "Tell me about what that looks like. What do you mean by that?" And they say things like, well, we share resources, we make copies for each other. It's all very like tangible things, but they're
yeah,
all very surface level things, like
sure,
things that I wouldn't consider our collaboration. We're not having the
right,
hard conversations. We're not really making progress or bettering ourselves because of that. It feels good, but we're
yeah,
not growing as a team. And so that's what I consider fake collaboration. Just because two or more people are gathered together does not mean that authentic collaboration is happening. And so, yeah, that's, I think, what you're talking about with those memes and things that we see. I think that happens so often because people haven't had mastery experiences with true collaboration. They haven't had a chance to see what it feels like. So in their mind, oh, this is what we do when we collaborate, you know? And I use that term in quotation marks.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's good to hear that example, right, of the fake collaboration, because just having a team where you have each other's backs, if somebody needs coverage for a few minutes or copies made in the middle of class, that's not collaboration, because collaboration is about building, like you said, collective efficacy within a group to meet the goal, and not just get past and then get past that vision and the goal piece, and actually do all the steps that you mentioned. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so tell me a little bit about some of your speaking engagements. You've listed a few that I'll put in the show notes, but you will be speaking at some conferences in the summer.
Yes. Yeah, I have so far, which the conferences are still coming in. Like they don't typically announce conferences or acceptances and things like that until later on. But I am excited to be keynoting at so I live in Texas, and there are several conferences in Texas, but I'm excited to be keynoting the Region 1 Special Education Institute. I have keynoted several other special education conferences this past year, and it's been lots of fun. They're one of the most fun groups to work with and especially keynote with because they are all energy, and I love it so much. So I'll be doing that in June, and I also will be presenting at the Region 13 Instructional Coaching Conference and the Learning Forward Texas Conference. And other conferences are yet to be determined, but I have a feeling there are some more.
Okay, great, great. Yeah, like I do as well. I submit proposals, and sometimes you don't know until like 3 months before the conference, and you might send it like almost a year in advance, right? So that's
Yes. Yeah.
and then you also have partnership opportunities with the Clarity Cycle. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes. When I primarily do consulting, I am working with school leadership teams. It is mostly like my heart is with turnaround schools, Title I schools, or often charter schools, or it could be schools that are just starting. And I take them through the Clarity Cycle framework so that their teams can get really aligned, especially as the school year is beginning. But I've started the Clarity Cycle framework with people mid-year as they're getting ready for the following semester or the following year. So I partner with schools to take them through the Clarity Cycle framework in a variety of ways, both in person and virtual. And I help leaders to think about how to spend less while also not overwhelming their teachers and holding them accountable without micromanaging. And so, yeah, that's something that I love to do. I would love to talk to anyone who's listening to this episode who's like, yeah, our teams really, really need that. Like, we're lacking some clarity. I'm your girl for that.
It's good to know that you could jump in anytime during the year, right? It could be a kind of a bridge between one school year and the next, or a mid-year boost for teachers and teams. And
Yeah.
I would assume you're not the one and done type of consultant. You'll follow through, come back, several months later and work with the schools as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been such an awesome thing to be able to do that, to work with schools, sometimes not just one year, but 2 years in a row. And I have a school in New Jersey that last year we went through the Clarity Cycle framework. And this year I'm providing coaching services for their campus principals. And God, it's been such a fantastic time with them to see not only the principal's growth, but the campus's growth as well.
So, out of everything we've talked about, we've talked about your podcast, your book, your trench story of being put in a leadership position when you weren't ready. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
The one thing sometimes I have too many things, but I promise I can get it down to one thing. I think the one thing from this episode that I would hope listeners take away is even though it is sometimes awful to go through the trenches, there is a purpose in that, and you won't see it now, but in hindsight, you are going to see the different ways that it shaped you, not only as a professional, but personally as a human being. And I just encourage you to look back on life and think, what are all of the other trenches that I've gone through? How have I come out of it? How can I come out of this differently? If you're going through the trenches right now, how can you come out of it differently so that you are absolutely preparing yourself to be a seed for other people who are going to go through the same thing. So that's what I would hope people take away.
Yeah, no, I think um, that's a great quote to end with because there's things that you learn from that trench story, but also to somebody who might be in a similar position, right? So,
Yes.
where can people connect with you and find you online?
I am primarily, of course, you can go to my website, catchingupwithcasey.com. You can find out all about me there. But I am primarily on LinkedIn, and my handle on LinkedIn is Catch Up with Casey. So those are the two primary places.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure learning more about what you do and how you can help schools and help teams work together more collectively.
Yes, I love it. Thank you for having me. This has been great.